The ship had no windows. It did not need them. There was nothing to see in the void between galaxies except darkness so complete that it could drive a person mad. Admiral Cole stood alone in his quarters, staring at a holographic image of a blue and green planet that no longer existed. Earth. Home. A world turned to ash 60,000 years ago. He was old now. His hair had turned white decades ago, and deep lines marked his face like rivers carved into stone. But his eyes remained sharp, filled with a fire that had burned for 6 generations of his family. His great-grandfather had been a child on the day Earth died. That child had grown up on stories of blue oceans and green forests, of cities filled with billions of people, of a sun that rose golden every morning. That child had passed those stories to his children, and they to theirs until Cole inherited not just memories, but a purpose. Today, that purpose would finally be fulfilled. He walked through the corridors of the Eternal Vigil, the greatest ship humanity had ever built. It stretched for 50 kilometers from bow to stern, carrying 12 million souls within its metal walls. Children ran past him, laughing and playing, unaware of what this day meant. They had been born in the void. They knew nothing of planets or sunlight or the feeling of wind on skin, but they would. Soon, they would know everything. The council chamber was full when arrived. 12 elders sat in a circle, representing the 12 original tribes that had formed when humanity fled into the darkness. Each tribe had descended from the survivors of a different nation, though those old boundaries had long since blurred. They were all simply human now. That was all that mattered. "Admiral Cole," said Elder Hayes, the oldest among them. Her voice was thin but steady. "You called this gathering, speak." Stepped into the center of the circle. A holographic map flickered to life around him, showing a vast web of stars connected by glowing lines. 300 star systems, the Dominion. 60,000 years ago, began. Our ancestors escaped the destruction of Earth through an experimental wormhole. They had 17 minutes of warning. 17 minutes to gather what they could and flee before they turned our sun into a weapon that consumed everything we had ever built. The elders listened in silence. They knew this history. Every human child learned it before they could walk. They called us a quarantine species, continued. They believed we were too dangerous to exist, too violent, too adaptive, too unpredictable. They feared what we would become if we were allowed to grow, so they chose to end us before we could begin. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the room. They failed. The map shifted, zooming out to show the empty void where humanity had hidden for. A single dot pulsed at the edge of everything, impossibly far from any star. For 60,000 years, we have lived in the space between galaxies. We have survived on recycled air and artificial light. We have built ships that would make our ancestors weep with pride. We have developed technology that the galaxy cannot imagine. And we have never, not for one single day, forgotten what was taken from us. Elder leaned forward. He was a small man with kind eyes, but his voice carried the weight of authority. "You have news, Admiral. What have your scouts found?" Allowed himself a small smile. "Everything." The map transformed again, filling with data points and tactical information. Fleet positions, defensive installations, population centers, trade routes. The complete military and civilian infrastructure of the Dominion mapped in perfect detail. "They have grown comfortable," said. "They destroyed 47 species across 50,000 years. They believe themselves invincible. Their military has not fought a real war in 3,000 years. Their technology has barely advanced in twice that time. They have forgotten what it means to be afraid." He looked around the circle, meeting each elder's eyes in turn. "I propose that we remind them." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Some elders nodded with grim satisfaction. Others looked uncertain, even afraid. Elder Hayes raised her hand for silence. "This is not a decision to make lightly," she said. "We have survived for 60,000 years by hiding, by remaining unseen. If we reveal ourselves and fail, humanity ends. There will be no second escape." "I understand," replied. "But we did not hide to survive. We hid to prepare. Our ancestors did not crawl into the darkness to die slowly in the void. They did it so that one day their children's children's children could return. That day has come." He gestured at the map one final time. A simulation played out, showing human ships emerging from hiding and engaging forces. The battle lasted seconds. Human technology, refined over 60 of isolation, was simply too advanced. Weapons could not penetrate human shields. Human weapons cut through armor like light through shadow. "We are ready," said simply. "The only question is whether we have the courage to take what we have prepared for." The vote was not close. 11 of 12 elders raised their hands in favor. Only hesitated, his kind eyes troubled. "I vote yes," he said finally. "But I want it recorded that I fear what we may become. Vengeance is a fire that can consume the one who wields it." Nodded respectfully. "Your concern is noted and honored, Elder. We will carry it with us as a warning." That night stood alone again, staring at the hologram of Earth. Tomorrow they would begin their journey back to the galaxy that had tried to murder them. Tomorrow the silence would end. He thought of his great-grandfather, that small child who had watched through a porthole as his world burned. That child had lived to be 140 years old, kept alive by medicine and stubborn will, and on his deathbed, he had gripped Young's hand with surprising strength. "Promise me," the old man had whispered, "promise me you will see it done." Had been only 10 years old, too young to understand the weight of such a promise. But he had made it anyway, and he had spent every day since preparing to keep it. "I remember," he said softly to the empty room. "I remember everything." Somewhere in the void, 147 ships began powering their engines for the first time in centuries. 12 million humans prepared to cross the darkness between galaxies. And in his quarters, an old admiral finally allowed himself to feel something he had suppressed for decades. Hoping. The long silence was over. Humanity was coming home. Commander Torres had never seen a star up close before. For her entire life, stars had been tiny points of light viewed through telescopes, impossibly distant things that existed only in stories and data files. Now, as her ship slipped silently through the outer reaches of space, she found herself staring at a yellow sun that reminded her of pictures she had seen of Earth's own star. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said Shaw, her tactical officer, stepping up beside her. He was a tall man with dark skin and serious eyes, but right now those eyes held the same wonder that felt. "It's smaller than I imagined," admitted. "All my life I heard stories about the sun, how it gave life to everything, how it rose and set every day. I always pictured something bigger." "They turned it into a bomb," said quietly. 60,000 years ago, they used technology we still don't fully understand to make it go supernova. Everything within 1 billion kilometers was vaporized in seconds. Nodded, she knew the history. Everyone knew the history. But seeing a star now, understanding for the first time what her ancestors had lost, made that history feel real in a way it never had before. "Commander," called from her station at the back of the bridge, was the team's, a small woman with red hair and an endless curiosity about alien cultures. "I'm picking up communications traffic from the third planet, civilian transmissions. They're discussing trade schedules and entertainment programs." "They have no idea we're here," said with grim satisfaction. Felt a chill run down her spine. Their ships were completely invisible to sensors. 60,000 years of development had produced stealth technology so advanced that they might as well be ghosts. They could fly right through the heart of space and never be detected. Which was exactly what they had been doing for the past 3 months. "Log everything," ordered. "Every ship movement, every military installation, every population center. Admiral Cole wants a complete picture before we begin." The reconnaissance mission had already yielded more information than anyone had expected. The Dominion was vast, spanning 300 star systems and trillions of inhabitants, but it was also old and slow. Their military had not fought a real war in. Their ships were powerful by galactic standards, but they had not significantly improved in thousands of years. Why would they? No one had ever challenged them. Was reviewing sensor data when suddenly gasped. "Commander, you need to see this." Hurried to the station. His face was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she pointed at her screen. "I found this in an encrypted archive," explained. "It's a list of species they've eliminated over the past 50,000 years." His blood ran cold as she read the entries. 47 species. 47 civilizations wiped from existence because they deemed them too dangerous to live. Some had been destroyed for being too aggressive, others for being too intelligent. One species had been exterminated simply because they reproduced too quickly. "Humans were going to be number 48, said softly. "We're going to be," repeated. "They failed with us." She was about to return to her station when something else on the list caught her eye. Several entries had annotations, notes indicating that the extinction had been incomplete, that small pockets of survivors might remain in hiding. "Can you cross-reference these locations with our sensor data?" 2 hours later, they found them. They were a silicon-based species. Where humans were made of carbon and water, they were made of crystal and mineral. They had lived in underground cities on a world that had bombarded with radiation weapons 10,000 years ago. They believed they had killed them all. They were wrong. Ship descended into a vast cavern beneath the surface of a dead moon. The cave was filled with soft blue light emanating from themselves. Their bodies were beautiful, like living sculptures of gemstone and glass. And when they saw the human ship land, they gathered in silence, watching with eyes that sparkled like diamonds. An elder approached. He was larger than the others, his crystalline body shot through with veins of gold. When he spoke, his voice resonated like wind chimes. "We have waited," he said in perfect English, a language he must have learned from ancient transmissions. "We have waited 10,000 years." "How did you know we would come?" asked. The elder, who introduced himself as Hal, led them deeper into the cavern. On the walls were carvings, images depicting the history of his people, their rise, their civilization, and their destruction at hands. But there were other carvings too. Images of a blue planet circling a yellow star. Images of soft-bodied creatures walking on 2 legs. Images of ships and cities and technology that they had somehow known existed, even though they had never made contact with humanity. "They spoke of you," Hal explained. "In their arrogance, they transmitted their victory across all frequencies. They wanted the galaxy to know what they had done. They wanted everyone to fear them." He stopped before the largest carving, a depiction of Earth being consumed by its own sun. "But we heard something else in their message," Hal continued. "Fear. They were afraid of you, afraid of what you were, afraid of what you would become. They destroyed 47 species without hesitation, but you were the only one they feared." Felt tears forming in her eyes. For 60,000 years, humanity had wondered why they had been targeted. Why them? What had they done to deserve extinction? Now she had her answer. They had been murdered not for anything they had done, but for what they might have become. They had seen humanity's potential and been terrified of it. "We survived," said. "We hid in the void between galaxies and we survived." Hal's crystalline body shimmered with light. If had to guess, she would have said he was weeping. "Then the waiting is over," he said. "We will follow you. They will follow you. Every species they tried to destroy has been waiting for someone to lead us. We knew it would be you. It could only have been you." Contacted Admiral Cole that night. She reported everything they had found, including the discovery of and the promise of other allies waiting in the darkness. "The galaxy hasn't forgotten us," she told him. They've been waiting for us to come back." There was a long pause before Cole responded. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Then let's not keep them waiting any longer." Looked out at the stars that night, truly seeing them for the first time. For 60,000 years, humanity had believed they were alone in their grief. But they weren't. The galaxy was full of survivors, of victims, of forgotten people waiting for justice. And humanity was going to bring it to them. All of them. The message arrived simultaneously on every inhabited planet in the Dominion. It appeared on military channels and civilian broadcasts. It played on screens in homes and in the great halls of government. It interrupted entertainment programs and emergency frequencies alike. And everywhere it played, it brought silence. 60,000 years ago, you burned our world and murdered 8 billion of our people. You thought us extinct. You were wrong. We are humanity. We have returned. And we remember everything. The face on the screen was human, old and weathered, with white hair and eyes that burned with cold fire. Admiral Cole spoke calmly, without anger, without threats. He simply stated facts, and those facts were more terrifying than any weapon. On Prime, High Counselor and watched the message from his throne room. He was ancient even by standards, having lived for nearly 3,000 years. His scales had faded from bright green to dull gray, and his 4 arms moved slowly with age. But his mind remained sharp, and right now that mind was racing with calculations. "Impossible," he said. "The humans were exterminated. I have read the records myself." His military advisor, a younger named L, approached the throne with obvious fear. "High Counselor, our sensors are detecting unknown vessels throughout Dominion space. 147 contacts. They appeared from nowhere." "From nowhere," and repeated, "Ships do not appear from nowhere." "These did, High Counselor. They were not there and then they were. Our sensors cannot explain it. Our sensors cannot even properly scan them. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our records." And felt something he had not felt in centuries. His heart's beating faster, his breathing becoming shallow. He recognized the sensation, though it took him a moment to name it. "Fear. Send the 3rd Fleet to intercept the nearest contact," he ordered. "Destroy it. Show these humans that their return is a mistake." The 3rd Fleet was the pride of the Dominion. 18,000 warships, each one bristling with weapons that could crack planets. They had never lost a battle. They had never even been challenged. As they moved to engage the lone human vessel that had appeared near the colony world of, their commanders were confident, arrogant even. The battle lasted 47 seconds. Lieutenant Reeves watched from the observation deck of the Eternal Vigil as the tactical display updated. 18,000 red dots representing ships blinked out one by one, replaced by white dots indicating destroyed or disabled vessels. The blue dot representing the human ship never wavered. "How is this possible?" he whispered. Captain Grant stood beside him, her arms crossed over her chest. She was in her 50s, with gray streaks in her dark hair and a face that had seen too much. She had served in the military her entire adult life, training for a war that had finally come. 60,000 years, she said simply. "That's how it's possible the stopped advancing. They had no one to fight, no one to fear, so they stayed the same. We didn't have that luxury." Shook his head. He had trained his whole life for this moment. His parents had trained him, and their parents had trained them, going back generations without number. Every human child learned combat tactics alongside reading and mathematics. Every human adult served in the military in some capacity. They were a civilization built entirely around a single purpose. But watching it actually happen was different. Those 18,000 ships had crews, families, lives. "This isn't a war," said. "It's a slaughter." Turned to face him. Her expression was unreadable. 60,000 years ago, they killed 8 billion humans in a single day. Men, women, children. They burned our world and laughed about it. They broadcast their victory across the galaxy as a warning to others. She placed a hand on his shoulder. I understand what you're feeling. You're seeing the enemy up close for the first time, and you're realizing they're not monsters. They're people. They have cities and children and hopes and fears. And now you're wondering if what we're doing is right. Nodded slowly. That was exactly what he was feeling. Good, said. That's good. The day we stop asking that question is the day we become what we hate. Never forget that those ships had people on them. Never forget that their families will mourn them. But also never forget what they did to us and what they would do again if they had the chance. She pointed at the tactical display, where more fleets were mobilizing across Dominion space. We're not here to destroy them. If we wanted extinction, we could sterilize their worlds from orbit and be done in a week. We're here for something harder. We're here for justice. And justice requires that we remember their people, even when they never extended the same courtesy to us. On Prime, High Counselor and received the news of the Third Fleet's destruction in stunned silence. 18,000 ships, his finest warriors, gone in less than a minute. How many ships did we destroy? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. El hesitated. None, High Counselor. We damaged none of them. Our weapons could not penetrate their shields. Our sensors could not lock onto their vessels. It was as though we were fighting ghosts. And rose from his throne and walked to the great window that overlooked the capital city. Below him, billions have lived their lives, unaware that their world had just changed forever, unaware that the comfortable certainty they had known for was about to collapse. Mobilize everything, he said finally. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon. If these humans want war, we will give them war. But even as he spoke, and knew it would not be enough, he had read the ancient records of humanity's destruction. He knew why his ancestors had chosen to eliminate them. It was not because humans were violent, though they were. It was not because they were unpredictable, though they were that too. It was because humans learned, they adapted, they evolved. They took every setback and turned it into an opportunity. They took every defeat and turned it into a lesson. Give them a century and they would match you. Give them a millennium and they would surpass you. His ancestors had given them 60,000 years. And looked up at the stars and, for the first time in his long life, understood what it felt like to be the prey instead of the predator. The humans had returned. And they remembered everything. The war lasted 3 months. Or rather, the military phase lasted 3 months. They threw everything they had at humanity. Millions of ships, trillions of soldiers, weapons that could shatter moons and tear holes in the fabric of space. None of it mattered. Human technology was not just better. It was incomprehensible. Scientists captured fragments of destroyed human drones and spent weeks trying to understand how they worked. They failed. The principles were too advanced, too different from anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was like showing a fire to a caveman and asking him to explain nuclear fusion. But what truly broke the spirit was not the technology. It was what humanity chose not to do. Admiral Cole stood on the surface of Prime, in the great plaza outside the Palace of Councils where emperors had ruled for 10,000 years. Behind him stood a single honor guard. Before him knelt High Counselor and, stripped of his rank and his dignity, surrounded by human soldiers who did not even bother pointing weapons at him. You could destroy us, and said, his voice hollow, why don't you? Looked at the ancient alien for a long moment before answering. 60,000 years ago, your people made a choice. You saw humanity as a threat, so you decided to eliminate us. You did not try to talk. You did not try to contain. You simply killed 8 billion people, gone in a flash of light. He crouched down, bringing himself to eye level with the kneeling counselor. For 60,000 years, my people have asked themselves one question. If we ever got the chance to return, what would we do? Would we become like you? Would we burn your worlds and laugh about it? Would we murder your children in their beds because they might grow up to threaten us someday? And said nothing. He simply stared at the human with eyes that had lost all hope. We decided the answer was no, continued. We decided that if we became like you, then you won. We decided that the best revenge was not destruction. It was being better than you ever were. He stood and turned to address the crowd of prisoners and human soldiers alike. The Dominion is over. Your military is destroyed. Your government is dissolved, but your people will live. Your cities will stand. Your children will grow up and have children of their own. This I promise. The news spread across the fallen Dominion like wildfire. Human forces had conquered 300 star systems in 3 months, and they had killed almost no civilians. They disabled military vessels instead of destroying them. They occupied cities without looting them. They captured leaders without executing them. They could not understand it. Neither could their former subjects, the dozens of species who had lived under Dominion rule for. They had expected the humans to be conquerors, tyrants, destroyers. Instead, they found something else entirely. Lieutenant Reeves led a humanitarian mission to a colony world that had been cut off from supplies during the fighting. The population was starving. Their infrastructure was failing. By all rights, they should have seen humans as monsters, the nightmare their ancestors had tried to prevent. Instead, when Shuttle landed in the central square, he found a crowd waiting in silence. Mothers holding children, elderly leaning on canes, young workers with fear in their eyes. Stepped out of the shuttle carrying containers of food and medical supplies. He had prepared a speech, something about how humanity came in peace, how they meant no harm to civilians. But when he saw the faces watching him, the words died in his throat. A small child broke away from her mother and approached him. She could not have been more than 5 years old, her scales still bright with youth. She looked up with curious eyes. "Are you the ones from the stories?" she asked. "The ones who were supposed to be gone forever?" Knelt down so he was at her level. Behind him, his team began distributing supplies to the crowd. "Yes," he said, "we're the humans. We went away for a long time, but now we're back. Are you going to hurt us?" It was such a simple question, asked with such innocent fear. Felt his heart break a little. "No," he said softly. "We're not going to hurt you. We're going to help you." The child studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. Then she reached out and took his hand in her small, scaled fingers. "Okay," she said. "My grandmother is sick. Can you help her too?" Spent the next 6 hours treating elderly and distributing food to families who had been expecting execution. By the end of the day, he was exhausted, his uniform covered in alien dust and his hands aching from work. But when he climbed back into his shuttle, he felt something he had not expected to feel. Peace. Back on Prime, Dr. Price made a discovery that would change everything. She had been studying the Dominion's archives, searching for information about humanity's original destruction, when she found something unexpected. "Admiral Cole," she said, bursting into his temporary headquarters, "you need to see this." The archive was massive, filling an entire building with data crystals containing information about every species that had ever encountered. And in a sealed section, locked away from public access, were samples, genetic samples, cultural records, complete blueprints for 47 species the Dominion had exterminated. "They kept trophies," said, his voice cold. "More than trophies," replied. "They kept everything, DNA sequences, brain patterns, cultural histories. With our technology, with 60,000 years of genetic advancement, we could." She trailed off, hardly daring to say it. "We could bring them back," finished. "We could resurrect every species they murdered." That night called a meeting of all human commanders and their new allies. Hal of the attended, as did representatives of the and a dozen other survivor species who had emerged from hiding. Together, They looked at the data had found. "This changes everything," said Commander Tors. "We came here for justice, for closure, but this is something more." "It is redemption," Hal said, his crystalline voice resonating through the chamber. "Not just for humanity, for all of us, for every species that tried to erase from existence." Looked around the room at the diverse faces gathered before him. Humans and others, all united by shared tragedy and shared hope. "Then that is what we will do," he said. "We will not just remember the dead, we will bring them back, every last one." And in a prison cell beneath the Palace of Councils, High Counselor and heard the news and wept, not for himself, not for his fallen empire, but for the realization that everything his people had done, all the death, all the destruction, all the attempts to control the galaxy's destiny, had been for nothing. Humanity had not come back for vengeance. They had come back for something far more powerful. Hope. 5 years had passed since humanity emerged from the void. 5 years since the fall of the Dominion. 5 years since the galaxy changed forever. Admiral Cole stood at the observation window of the station humanity had built at the heart of what used to be the solar system. Outside, where Earth had once orbited a yellow sun, there was only a field of cold, dark rock and fatting radiation. The sun was gone, transformed into a supernova 60,000 years ago. Earth was gone, vaporized along with everything humanity had built. But they had not come here to mourn. They had come here to remember. Ships filled the void around the memorial station. Thousands of them, representing every species in what was now called the Covenant of Forgotten Worlds. Vessels glittered like living crystals. Ships pulsed with soft, inner light. Transports hung at a respectful distance, their crews watching in silence. And others, so many others. A race of aquatic beings that had exterminated 8,000 years ago, floated in specially designed water tanks aboard their newly constructed ships. They had been brought back from preserved genetic samples just 18 months ago, and already their population numbered in the thousands. The species of shapeshifters murdered for their unpredictability moved through the crowds in forms both alien and familiar. Some had chosen to appear human for the ceremony, a gesture of respect that brought tears to many eyes. 47 species had been erased from existence by the Dominion. 43 had now been restored. The remaining 4 would be revived within the next decade, their genetic codes more complex and requiring more time to reconstruct. Looked at them all and felt something loosen in his chest. For 60,000 years, humanity had carried the weight of their dead. 8 billion voices crying out for justice, for remembrance, for meaning. And now, at last, he could answer them. "Admiral," said a voice behind him, "the delegations are ready." Turned to find Admiral Tor standing in the doorway. She wore her dress uniform, decorated with medals and ribbons that meant nothing to her personally but everything to the people who had given them. She had taken command of humanity's military forces 2 years ago, when had finally admitted that his body was too old for active duty. "Thank you," he said. "I'll be along shortly." She hesitated before leaving. "Are you sure you want to do this? You've given enough, more than enough. No one would blame you for sitting this one out." Smiled. "I've been waiting for this day for my entire life. My father waited for it. My grandfather. My great-grandfather who was 7 years old when Earth burned. I'm going to see it through to the end." The main hall of the memorial station was filled with representatives from every species in the Covenant. Thousands of beings sat or floated or stood, depending on their biology, watching as Cole walked slowly to the podium at the center of the chamber. His steps were unsteady now, requiring a cane to support him. But his voice, when he spoke, was as strong as ever. 60,000 years ago, he began, the Dominion murdered my people. They burned our world. They salted the void where our sun once shone. They believed they were protecting the galaxy from a dangerous species. They were wrong." He paused, looking out at the assembled delegations. For 60,000 years, we survived. We hid in the darkness between galaxies, where no light reached and no life should have been possible. We built cities in the void. We raised children who never knew the warmth of a sun. We passed down stories of a blue world that none of us would ever see again. Tears were flowing now from humans and aliens alike. The elder Hal glowed with soft light, his equivalent of weeping. We could have become monsters. We could have let our grief and our anger consume us until there was nothing left but hate. We had every right. No one would have blamed us. Shook his head slowly. But we didn't. We chose something different. We chose to remember not just our pain, but our hope. We chose to carry forward not just our desire for revenge, but our dreams of a better future. We chose to believe that survival was not enough, that what mattered was what we became after we survived. He gestured to the viewport, where the darkness of the dead solar system stretched endlessly. Earth is gone. We cannot bring it back, but we can build something new, something better. Something that honors the 8 billion people who died here, not through destruction but through creation. The crowd stirred as Lieutenant Reeves stepped forward, now a captain himself after 5 years of service. Behind him walked a group of children. Human children, 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 and children from a dozen other species, all walking hand in hand. "These are the first children born in the new covenant," said. "They will grow up together. They will learn together. They will build a future that none of their ancestors could have imagined." One of the children, a human girl no older than 6 with bright eyes and a curious smile, broke away from the group and approached the podium. Bent down, his old joints protesting, and she whispered something in his ear. He smiled, then turned back to the crowd. "She wants to know if the people who lived on Earth would be proud of us." Was quiet for a moment, collecting himself. "I believe they would," he said finally. "I believe that if they could see us now, standing here among the survivors of 47 species we brought back from extinction, surrounded by allies we never expected to find, they would tell us that we did something more important than avenge them. We honored them. We showed the galaxy what humanity could become when we chose hope over hate." He straightened as best he could. "We are humanity. We remember our dead, we honor our past, and we build the future." The ceremony continued for hours, with speeches and rituals from every species in the Covenant. But when it was finally over, Admiral Tors found herself standing at a viewport with the small human girl who had approached. "Admiral Tors," the girl said, "what was Earth like?" Knelt down, just as Reeves had once knelt before a child, and looked into the girl's eyes. "It was a blue world," she said, "full of oceans and forests and billions of people who dreamed of the stars. They couldn't see us from there. They couldn't know that one day their children's children would travel farther than anyone thought possible. But they dreamed anyway. They hoped anyway. And because they did, we're here." She pointed out the viewport at the assembled ships, the thousands of beings from dozens of species, all gathered to remember and to celebrate. "That's Earth's real legacy," said. "Not the planet that was destroyed, but the dream that survived." The girl smiled and took his hand. Outside in the darkness where humanities once spun around a bright yellow sun, something new was being born. Not vengeance, not conquest, not empire. Something gentler, something stronger. A new dawn was rising in the galaxy. And this time, no one would face the darkness alone.